I got a speaker.
Good evening, everybody. Would just like to do a test vote on the Go Vote system, if you wouldn't mind. So if you could test your devices, please.
If anyone's having problems with Go Vote, can you put your hand up, please, so we can get IT to come?
Yes, good evening, Council. Please be seated. So this is my latest. Okay, then. I would like to welcome everyone here this evening to this meeting of Newcastle City Council, and welcome also to anyone watching online this evening. First of all, item 1, can we have any apologies for tonight's meeting, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've had apologies from councillors Ashby, Brown, Campion, Hare, Hobson, Lowson, Mafemba, Mark Mitchell, Shackwell, Stevenson, Stoker Walker and Williams.
Do we have any apologies to add to that list? Yes? Right. Councillor Ellis? Councillor Chisholm? We've got Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Robinson. Any others? Sorry? Councillor Hay. Councillor Hay? Yes, okay. Got that? Any more? Any more for any more? No, not a lot. Okay, we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda then, which is minutes of previous meetings. We have 2 sets of minutes. First set of minutes from 6th of March 2024. Does Council agree those minutes? And the second set of minutes from 22nd of May 2024. Does Council agree those minutes? Agreed. Okay. Item 3 on the agenda is official announcements, and on this occasion we have no official announcements this evening, so that's fairly straightforward. And for correspondence, item 4, we've had 2 items of correspondence on very important issues, I believe. Somebody's trying to attract my attention here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Haddad.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's in relation to item 4 about correspondence.
All right,
And it was something I had wanted to let Council know. The correspondence relates to the... Sorry about my voice. Relates to the debate we had in January about the closure of pharmacies and shortage of medication. And I wanted to thank the Chief Executive and the Leader of Council for writing letters, and for everyone in this chamber who spoke about their experiences and supported the move to question the removal of pharmacies in certain areas of Newcastle. And I'm very pleased to let everyone know that the matter was referred to the Interim Care Board, and that they undertook an analysis of the loss of pharmacies in Newcastle. The result of that analysis showed need for at least 2 pharmacies in 2 places. One was Kenton and the other one was Chillingham Road. And they have now got applicants for companies, businesses, to take over those services, and they are currently under consideration. So thank you for everybody who took part in those demonstrations, and thank you for the people who signed petitions and everything else. And we will get another 2 pharmacies in the city. So I'm glad to report on that.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Haddad, and thank you for struggling through that. I hope your voice is getting better soon. Yes, certainly pharmacies are such a vitally important resource, and to raise the issue like this, both locally and nationally, I think is very, very important. And the other piece of correspondence was also an important issue in relation to housing. So does Council agree to receive those items of correspondence? Item 5 is petitions, and I believe unusually we've had no petitions submitted this evening, so no petitions at all. Item 6 is public questions and addresses, and we have 1 request to address Council this evening. I think on the last occasion I referred to you as Councillor Brian Moore. I regret I can't refer to you on that. But Mr Brian Moore, who's a regular this evening, and as you'll know, Mr Moore, you have, and I seek guidance on this, how many minutes? 5 minutes to address Council. Okay.
Right. Dear Council, the admissions fiasco at Gosforth Academy is well publicised. But let me remind Council the shambles it has been. The immense pressure and distress the young people and their parents have endured as the Academy rewrote its own admissions policy, completely due to failure of this authority to provide a high school at the Great Park, and with its support for the school's 2023 admissions policy. Let me give Council a quick potted history of the fiasco of the Great Park, building homes without school provision. Dozens of young people who put nearby Gosforth Academy as their first choice have been allocated park places at the Great Park Academy, which is 3 miles away. But it's not yet built. while pupils who live in the Great Park and further away have been allocated places at Gosforth Academy. It means 120 children will be taught for at least a year in temporary classrooms on the playing fields of their preferred school. Development started in the Great Park suburb in 2001, with many children joining Gosforth First and Middle School feeder schools. Gosforth Group Multi-Academy Trust submitted a bid to build a Great Park Academy more than 10 years ago. It was originally scheduled to open in 2020. Yes, 2020. But after numerous construction delays, it's now to open in September 2025. I'll now go through the oversubscription categories. Category 1, looked after children, 6. Medical, 0. Staff, interestingly, 2. Feeder, 426. Distance, and we're talking Gosforth here, 0. Siblings, we're talking siblings got before, 0. To put it bluntly, the usual criteria of distance and siblings selected first has been thrown out. Apparently the only school in Newcastle to do so. Let me go through the reasons why the admissions to Gosforth Academy was wrong and needs to be reopened. The policy is in breach of national code. Siblings linked nor distance to the school were not considered. Children living in Darras Hall got in over children who live over the road. Children who live in the Great Park did not put their local school as a first choice and got in due to 20 years of this authority's failure to provide a school working with the developers. Families who pay council tax to Newcastle for the postcode where their local school is lost out to families paying council tax in Northumberland, North Tyneside and Gateshead. The decision breached local and national policy on sustainability and places. Council is encouraging Newcastle as a clean air zone, and this decision will increase congestion in Newcastle. Council should be in full support of our local children going to the local school. It is Council's policy. I could go on, but I think I've got my point across. The families in Great Park have also been let down by the council. Local children to Gosforth Academy should not be pawns in the game to right the wrong, created as a consequence of this authority's failure. When the school is built, and I'm sure the admissions policy will apply correctly, I have no doubt. Gosforth families, Great Park families will go to Gosforth Park Academy. They'll not go to Gosforth Academy. And local pupils to Gosforth Academy wouldn't go to Gosforth Park Academy. I am therefore asking Council to use its position to get Gosforth Academy to reopen the admissions for Gosforth to include as a priority siblings and distance from the Gosforth Academy as the key criteria, as it has always been and it is implemented across the
30 seconds, Mr. Moore.
And has been implemented across this city. Since writing this speech, there have been developments, and I'm sure the Council will respond on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Thank you. I think I'm calling now on Councillor Story. Is that right, to respond? 3 minutes to respond, Councillor Story. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Council. As a council, we understand the concerns and challenges raised by parents and carers and children in relation to those children who did not get into their preferred school in the Gosforth area. The questions and issues that you raise are valid and concerning, although I have to say there are some issues around factual accuracy, but in the 3-minute time frame that I have to respond today, and due to the limitations on what I can say due to the pre-election period, I could not possibly do justice to the level of detail that would be required to accurately answer the points that you have made. Sorry. I am committed, however, to providing you with a written response in due course, and that's being prepared now. As I'm sure you are aware, government policy has caused significant changes to responsibilities for schools over the last 15 years, especially since the academisation, and this has significantly reduced the powers of local authorities in a number of areas, one of them being admissions. Local authorities cannot legally establish new schools, so new secondary schools, including Jesmond Park Academy, are free schools delivered by the Department for Education, not the local authority. Academy trusts are the admissions authority for their schools, not local authorities. Newcastle City Council has no power to change academy policies or to challenge them unless they are unlawful, and in this case, my understanding, the advice that I've been given, is currently we cannot see that the admissions policy is unlawful. I have been led to believe that Gosforth Group have committed to reviewing their admissions policies, which I think is a really good thing. And when they receive a response from the Office of Schools Adjudication regarding the 2025 policy, then we will be in a position to let you know further about that. And at this point, I just want to say my heart does go out to children who have had a very, very difficult time. And I do firmly believe that, I strongly wish that local authorities did have more influence, but the fact of the matter is we do not. But I will get back to you and answer every point that you've pointed out in your email to us.
Yes, thank you much. Just a second. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Story. Thanks for that response. You have 1 minute to respond then, Mr Moore.
Yes, Councillor, thank you so much for your non-answer, one would say. Is there a time scale to your written reply, please? It is amazing that for something that is so important to so many young people in the Gosforth area, that the council will not respond to an oral question. And factually, I was right in what I was saying.
Okay, Mr Moore, thanks very much. You're entitled to your opinion. Yes.
I did not say, for clarification, point of order, I did not say I would not respond. I said I am not allowed to respond at this point in time. You were given 5 minutes, I was given 3, and I was told I was not allowed to then respond to you further. But you will get a response, and you can have that response within 21 days.
Okay, Councillor Story, you've clarified your point. Okay, we'll give you. Okay, we'll give you the remainder of your minute then, Mr Moore. Okay, but Councillor Story has responded to your question.
Thank you, Councillor. And may I say, on a personal level, hold on. Let me finish. I'm a member of the public, and I'm just going to wish my best to the Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor, who, in my opinion, are two of the best councillors on this authority.
Okay,
and
can we?
Pleasure and privilege of dealing with
Mr Moore, can we hang on, Mr Moore? Can we temper our comments? Your response is to the response from Councillor Story, okay? And
okay.
I think you've responded to that, all right? And I think you've had your minute as well. Okay.
Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Right. Okay. We'll now move on to item 7, which is questions by council members. This is a 15-minute slot, so I would ask people to bear that in mind in terms of your questions and supplemental questions and responses, and try and keep it fairly concise. So I think the first question comes from Councillor Kane in relation to heat and low traffic neighbourhoods, and I think the responses from Councillor Kemp, is that right, will be just in readiness. Okay. All right. I'm told that the question is deemed to have been put, so that you don't need to actually read the question out, Councillor Kane. Okay?
Yes, I was waiting for
I'm just seeking. Yes, I'm just still going through my apprenticeship. Okay, then, Councillor Kemp, if you'd like to respond.
I will respond to the question on behalf of Councillor Williams, who is unable to be here today. What I would say is, in light that I'm not Councillor Williams, I'm probably not in a position to respond to any supplemental. So any supplemental question is asked, I will ensure that there's a written response provided. So, with regards to the question, there are two key statements, really, that need to emphasise, and that is that neither Councillor Williams nor I have intervened in the scheme in Heaton to influence decision-making. We were consulted on the decision not to make the scheme permanent, and all concerns sent to Cabinet members were passed to those working in transport. The decision to not make the Heaton LTN permanent is not a political one. This was a decision delegated to officers who understand the detail of the scheme and can offer expert advice as to whether the order was appropriate to be made permanent. They are an excellent team and they have our full support. Previous decisions relating to LTNs have also been officer-led decisions which have been led by the data evidence and whether the scheme has met the objectives outlined at the start, which is clear part of the legislative process. We are committed to improving our residents' communities and we will continue to engage with them on how we can solve the issues in their neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Councillor King.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. In those freedom of information responses, an email that appears to come from a Cabinet member describes residents who set up a website to support the LTN as, quote, the cycling lobby. This seems very bizarre when we are meant to be promoting clean air, active travel and getting residents to help us meet our net zero targets. So perhaps Councillor Kemp could confirm whether or not they see pro-LTN residents as the cycling lobby.
Councillor Kemp.
Are you asking me to make reference to a particular email or a generic question around whether I see people who are in support of LTNs?
The latter.
The latter? Well, I don't know, because I wouldn't see them as an amorphous group of people. They're a collection of individuals who will have their own particular interests. I wouldn't see them as anything other than individuals who have joined together to have a particular view on a particular intervention.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kemp. I now have two supplementals, one from Councillor Cookson, to be followed by Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The trial filter underneath the East Coast Main Line at Southview West was installed on the 23rd of January 2023 on an 18-month trial, and therefore the legal orders will expire on the 23rd of July 2024. That means the decision to make it permanent has to be made this month, once again during a pre-election period. We've not had any feedback as to whether the trial there has been deemed successful or not from the members, from the officers, sorry. Will residents and ward members be consulted before the officers make a decision on this? And when will the decision be publicised?
Thank you, Councillor Cookson. Councillor Kemp.
As I said, Lord Mayor, I wasn't in a position to be able to provide a response, but I'll ensure that you do receive one. Though, of course, despite my powers of leadership, I wasn't in a position to anticipate the timing of a general election. That would be the only comment I would make.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'm concerned about this idea about having consultation carried out without leadership, or kind of rolling out the low traffic neighbourhoods without that political leadership. And surely if the Cabinet wants safer streets and cleaner air, then...
Is this going to be a question, Councillor?
It is, yes. Then consultations must surely involve setting out that case clearly and persuasively. So does the Council agree with this? And how will you learn lessons from the implementation of the most recent low traffic neighbourhoods to improve the process next time?
Okay, before Councillor Kemp responds, I understand I should acknowledge that as your maiden contribution to Council, or maiden speech to Council. Okay, Councillor Kemp, over to you.
Well, I hope they change, because I'm not actually clear what the question was. You asked me to agree to something, but I'm not clear what you're asking me to agree with.
Want to clarify the point briefly?
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Hartley.
So you were talking about, let's think about the consultation that was going on before the low traffic neighbourhoods were implemented.
Could you just ask the question,
Keep it
please?
brief.
Right. What lessons have you learned from the failure of the low traffic neighbourhoods, and what would you do differently next time?
You said, actually, sorry, Lord Mayor, just as a point of context, I appreciate it's your first question, but the starting point was you were saying something about leadership. You've now changed it something differently. You said something, the initial point was around leadership, so I'm just not clear.
I think there was... No, I think there was a preamble. There was
yes.
certainly a preamble to the question, and the question was about lessons in relation to low traffic neighbourhoods.
So simply the question about lessons about low traffic neighbourhoods?
Yes. I'm talking about the importance of political leadership in low traffic neighbourhoods, and clearly we've had failures in the low traffic neighbourhoods. What lessons have we learned and what can we change?
We can't encompass 2 or 3 questions in one. Okay, is your question about leadership, or is your question about the lessons in relation to low traffic neighbourhoods?
The lessons learned. What will you do differently next time?
Okay, it's about low traffic neighbourhoods, Councillor Kemp. Okay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think we're sort of getting somewhere near a question. What would I do differently? I don't think... Personally, we would look at a consultation, as we have said very clearly, with neighbourhoods and about co-creating solutions. So actually not looking at enforcing something, actually developing collectively with a neighbourhood and understanding, starting off with what the actual challenges are in communities, co-creating solutions together.
Good, we're getting somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You
Thank you,
patronising man.
Thank you, Councillor Hartley. We'll now move on to the next question, and learning from my experience of the first question, it's the question as put from Councillor Woodhook in relation to Gosforth High Street, and I have Councillor Kemp to respond.
So, as response, again, we have had 8 collisions on Gosforth High Street since the introduction of the bus lane. There was a pedestrian accident at the crossing adjacent to North Cross Street where a pedestrian was hit by a car. A person got their fingers caught when exiting a taxi. 2 accidents involved cyclists turning into and out of the side streets. 4 accidents involved buses and included passengers falling on the bus. And 2 of the bus accidents involved vehicles changing lanes at West Avenue. The speed limit on Gosforth High Street is 20 miles per hour. Officers are continuing to monitor data, including accident data, before deciding whether to make the scheme permanent. And any decision will be informed by the data and feedback from the consultation process, which is now closed.
Councillor Woodhook, supplemental.
Okay, as one of the not so good 2 best councillors in the council, Lord Mayor, I would ask, given the upward trend that the accident statistics on the High Street have clearly shown, and given that the implementation of the bus routes is against what was unanimously agreed by this council in 2019, and would the Leader of Council say that there was any ability for a move towards looking at using a district centre, which is what Gosforth High Street is, rather than a thoroughfare, which is the cause of these accidents?
It's a bit of
That's the question.
A bit of a leading question, an open question. Okay, Councillor Kemp.
I'm not in a position to answer directly on behalf of my cabinet colleague, but what I would say is I'm not clear that what you state is suggested as empirically accurate. I'm not sure whether there is an upward trend in accidents if incidents such as an individual catching their fingers in a door, taxi door, counts as an accident in this instance, because I think we're correlating a number of issues together, and I think it would be worthwhile looking a bit more in detail at the accidents, the causation of the accidents, and whether there's a relation to. The principle of district hearts I'm entirely wedded to, but that's not the same as saying a point around the bus lanes. I am committed and have been committed for a long, long time about the rebirth, regeneration and repurpose of district hearts across the whole of our city.
Councillor Ferguson, supplemental.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Picking up on your final comments there, Councillor Kemp, would you then agree with the Liberal Democrats that the High Street should be a destination, not a thoroughfare as it is currently configured?
Councillor Kemp.
I'd find it always quite difficult to agree with the Liberal Democrats, to be honest, Councillor Ferguson. But hey, I think actually it's slightly more semantic than you're suggesting, because for many people, the district heart is a district heart, and it is a destination for many people who visit to access the facilities and services that exist there, rather than a thoroughfare. I think, you know, some of it is about perception. I would like to see Gosforth High Street continue to thrive and grow and develop and provide increased local services for people, both locally and further afield.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kemp. We now go to the final oral question. The question is put by Councillor Huddart, and it's perhaps a good thing that it'll give your voice a rest, Councillor Huddart, when the question is as put. And I think we have Councillor Mains to respond to that question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Huddart. Yes, I agree with what you said in your question in terms of everybody's entitled to a decent home, and it is essential for people and communities to thrive. I'm very pleased to have been given the housing as my portfolio. I think it's will have a lot of challenges, and it'll be something really interesting to be involved with. In terms of the specifics of your question, I would like to reassure Councillor Huddart and the rest of Council. Council officers have been preparing for this move for months, and that we have put in a great deal of preparation for the handover. The transfer will not result in any gaps in governance, and as members know, our scrutiny committees will be there to hold myself and officers to account as they offer any other service within the council. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Huddart, supplemental.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. YHN had an active group of tenant representatives with voices, people who were regularly consulted for their opinions, for comments, etc. And I wanted to ask, what action is the Cabinet member going to proposing to ensure that this representation will continue?
Yes, that's very straightforward. Councillor Huddart, obviously we're going to build on that group of tenants reps and look at other methods of consultation, because obviously we want to make sure that the tenant satisfaction measures, you know, meet the needs of our tenants. So yes, we will be building on that, and I'm not sure if you're the representative for the Lib Dems for housing, but I'll certainly, you are, well, I'll certainly be sharing information with yourself on a regular basis, as well as with the rest of Council, on the progress that we're making during this transfer. Thank you.
I've got a supplemental from Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When I was first elected, I was quite surprised that ward members don't, as a matter of course, receive any management information or key performance indicators from YHN about the homes in the ward in which we represent. We are frequently contacted by residents who ask if we can assist in getting repairs done on their homes, or when void or vacant properties near them will be refurbished and brought back into use, and where they are in the queue.
I assume, Councillor Cookson, this is going to be shaped into a question?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
It's got a feel of a speech about it, okay?
Yeah.
Where they are in the queue. Can I ask officers? We can ask officers about individual cases, but I feel we have insufficient information about the wider picture in the ward. Will the Cabinet member agree with me that, as part of the work to bring YHN back in-house, that providing a regular and robust set of management information and key performance indicators on a ward-by-ward basis for things like repairs, voids, complaints and damp and mould cases will allow ward members sufficient information to ensure that these satisfaction figures improve?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cookson. Councillor Mains.
Yes, I'd just like to say that obviously we have a new director coming into post on the 1st of June, and one of the big key things that we will be doing is doing an audit of our stock. This will take quite a long time to do, because it means visiting every single council-owned property in the city, and that's to look at the state of the stock and to look at things like repairs and things like that. I'll have to take that issue up with officers, whether that is something that could be provided on a ward-by-ward basis. But I would like to reassure you that the main priorities for us, once the transfer is taking place, is to look at the repairs and maintenance and construction issues that we have, and to bring back voids into use, because we do have a homeless problem, as everybody in this chamber knows. But I will take that back to directors, and I will see whether that is something, if not on a ward basis, if it's something that could be there as a document for people to go into and have a look. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Names. One question marked for written reply has been circulated with responses in the supplemental agenda and published on the website. Item 8 on the agenda is appointments. Are the appointments agreed as set out by Council? We now move on to item 9, which is notice of motions. And the first motion, it relates to recycling, and it's to be moved by Councillor Kane and to be seconded, as I understand, by Councillor Coles.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. May I start by wishing Councillor Williams all the best, and I hope she's back in action soon. I'll start with a quote, though. I want Newcastle to become a model of excellence in how it deals with waste, a city that is emulated all around the world. That was Councillor Kemp in 2017 announcing the Waste Commission. It is very interesting that if you Google the Waste Commission report, it doesn't appear on the council website. I had to take that from a press release. And last year, Newcastle was rated the 3rd worst metropolitan borough for recycling in England and Wales. So I doubt very many people are going to be beating a trail to see how this council deals with waste in the city. I say this many times, but in November 2019, I brought a zero waste motion to council, which was watered down somewhat, but was agreed by council. And I brought that because the version of the waste strategy we had then had no definite targets in it. It just said we were going to track government targets, which again is completely at odds with this idea of being a world leader in tackling waste. Last year, or maybe into the year before, Councillor Williams suggested a climate change committee that we host a task and finish group into the decarbonisation of waste. Councillor Taylor and I joined Councillor Williams in that task and finish group, and we put together quite a comprehensive report which I believe would help solve many of Newcastle's waste problems. So the motion today is to ask, in between, we got a written response back to that report at Climate Change Committee, which was pretty negative about all our suggestions. I still believe that those recommendations made by Councillor Williams, now Cabinet Member of course, and Councillor Taylor and myself are a blueprint for the way forward, and I do hope that Cabinet will start implementing those recommendations and put us back into at least the mid-table of recycling in this country, and preferably further up. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Well within 5 minutes as well. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Coles?
Do you mind if I reserve my response until we hear from the other side?
I believe, did you say you reserve the right to speak?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I think we have an amendment to this motion to be moved by Councillor Ali and seconded by Councillor Kemp. Is that right? Yes?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and good evening. As set out in the amendment, the Council vision in the waste strategy is a Newcastle that is clean, green and sustainable, that wastes less and recycles more. We've worked hard to improve our recycling rate over the last 20 years. Between 2011 and 2022, with the exception of 1 year, our recycling rate has been consistently between 38% and 40%. In summer 2022, we intentionally removed the mechanical biological treatment facility at Byker and closed the Ellington in-vessel composting facility. This was in preparation for the introduction of citywide food waste collections. Food waste collections will be implemented in line with the requirements of the Environmental Act 2021 in due course. Lord Mayor, we therefore expected our recycling figure to fall back for this reason. However, the implementation of food waste collections will no doubt increase our recycling rate once again. As a point of clarification, Councillor Williams responded to this same request at Council in March of this year, where she pointed out, as I will do now, that Councillor Kane's recollection of the Council meeting in November 2019 is incorrect. The Council did not adopt a zero waste policy at that meeting. Councillor Kane's motion was amended and Council resolved to asking Cabinet to consider adopting a citywide target of zero waste to landfill as soon as practically possible. Owing to a clerical error, the wrong version of the motion was included in the minutes of the November 2019 Council meeting. However, this was corrected at City Council on the 2nd of September 2020. Councillor Williams, as suggested in the motion, was a member of the Waste Decarbonisation Task and Finish Group and a joint author of the final report. And although I am now the portfolio holder, I will work with Councillor Williams on our waste strategy to provide a pathway to waste minimisation and improved recycling for all our residents. Our strategy includes a plan to reduce the amount of waste we send to landfill, to promote waste minimisation and to increase recycling. Government have set a target that by 2035, less than 10% of waste will go to landfill. By implementing our waste strategy, we project that we send less than 10% of our waste to landfill substantially earlier than 2035. When we launched the waste strategy, we committed to review it at year 5. This work is currently taking place, and where possible, the recommendations of the Task and Finish Group are being considered as part of the review process. We will continue our work to update the strategy, which is intended to be reported at July Cabinet and will be published on the Council website afterwards. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. Councillor Kemp, second.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to support the amendment to the motion. As an administration, we are committed to the reduction of waste, and our actions speak for themselves. I was the Cabinet member that led work on the waste strategy initially, and as Councillor Kane has pointed out, I did lead the establishment of the independent Newcastle Waste Commission, the first of its kind in the country, to address the problems of increasing waste in a city. I'm genuinely proud of that work, and the work is currently being reviewed. There are some recommendations which clearly societal impacts and governmental changes need to be updated, but I think it set out a brave and bold ambition for the Council, and it's something I'll stand by. The motion from Councillor Kane makes a statement about the top performing councils, and it is true, but worth noting some context. They're all district councils in the top 6 and so are not comparable with Newcastle or other core urban cities. They are less densely populated, will have properties with larger gardens, and so their garden waste contributes considerably to their higher recycling levels. So I think it's just worth understanding about comparables and ensuring that we compare equal with equal. Our ambition has always been to transform the way we think about waste and to inspire individuals and organisations to take responsibility for changing their behaviour relating to waste and to be proud of their communities and the environment we live in. Our recycling rate has been consistently between 38% and 40%, and we're aware that there will be a reduction due to the planned works in Biker Plant in preparation for the food waste collection. It is important, as Councillor Ali has said, to restate that the Council did not adopt the zero waste policy, and it really needs to be ended now. The continued claims of something that actually didn't happen. This is not Orwell, this is reality. So we need to be working practically to head towards a target of zero waste to landfill. That's in all of our interests and I think shared ambitions of all political parties. With that in mind, we've established a pathway to minimise waste and improve recycling for all our residents. We've already embedded the recommendations of the Waste Decarbonisation Task and Finish Group in the refreshed waste strategy due to come to Cabinet in July. So I hope Councillor Kane, you will acknowledge that it isn't being dismissed, it's been acknowledged. We recognise the work that was undertaken by the 3 councillors, and therefore I'm happy to support the amendment to this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I only have one speaker, and that's Councillor Taylor. Perhaps Councillor Taylor could go to the microphone and say whether you're speaking in support of the motion or the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I find it extremely disappointing that so little progress has been made to increase recycling rates in Newcastle, as good recycling rates are vital for achieving net zero. In October 2010, under the Liberal Democrat administration, household waste recycling and composting had risen to 46%, up from 18.5% in July 2006. And the 46% was above the target we had set 3 years earlier. We expected to see that progress continue, but instead it has fallen, in spite of the commitment to zero waste to landfill made in November 2019. Of course, we're aware that the in-vessel composting of waste has been stopped, in view of the Council being expected to collect food waste in future, and that this is one of the causes of the reduced rate. But it is difficult to understand why this has happened so far in advance of the introduction of food waste collection, which isn't due to start until 2025. We also believe that setting targets for performance does help to ensure that progress is made. Instead, the current Council's plan says, we will strive year on year to improve the quality of recycling and increase recovery levels to the highest practical and possible levels. Not exactly ambitious. And I have to say that from what Councillor Williams said in the group that we had, I don't think she really believes that getting to less than 10% via the incinerator in Teesside is really the way forward. Due to the poor performance on recycling scrutiny, Climate Change Committee did set up a task and finish group on the decarbonisation of waste, which made a number of recommendations to address this, including access to recycling for all residents, moving away from communal recycling bins due to contamination, better partnership working, better communication, and better use of the planning system. And all our motion asks for is for these recommendations to be adopted to get Newcastle recycling back on track. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I don't have any other speakers listed here. No one else? Okay. In that case, we'll go back to Councillor Coles as the seconder of the motion, if you'd like to address Council.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Lord Mayor. Probably won't have the panache of my colleague, but I think Councillor Kemp talked about reality, and Councillor Taylor added to the fact that the recycling rates for household waste have collapsed. We are now at less than 26% of household waste being recycled. Now, this particular failure demands urgent action, as has been put forward by my colleagues, but adding insult to injury, residents now face quite a hefty replacement cost for their bins. £30 per bin and £5 per glass caddy. Even if they're stolen and reported to the police, the cost is borne by the resident of the property. Now, this is a very small efficiency saving, and is it worth the high cost of reduced recycling? Should residents be burdened with, on top of their council tax, extra fees to have their bins taken away and bins replaced? Now, with the what is quite clearly fairly abysmally low recycling waste of household waste, the charge is unjustifiable. Thank you, Mr. Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coles. I understand that's a maiden speech as well, so maybe a second round of applause is due. Councillor Kane, do you have any final observations you wish to make? Okay. In that case, we'll move to the amendment. Is the amendment agreed? Is the amendment agreed by Council, or do we need to go for a vote? No, so we need a vote then. We need a vote. We're now voting on the amendment to the motion. Are we all familiar with go vote? If you can't use the go vote, I think it's hands raised, and then we'll do a count. No, well, let's have the vote first. Back there we've got Councillor. If you'd like to stand when you've got your hand raised so I can see you, it's Councillor Keating. Yes, Councillor Keating there. At the back, Councillor Cairns. Councillor. All right, Councillor Keating, what's your vote? Against? Yes. Councillor Keynes? In favour? Is that Councillor Bell? Yes. Councillor Bell? In favour. Councillor Ali? In favour. Councillor Wooddock, sorry, how could I miss Councillor Wooddock? Against. And Councillor Morrissey? You're against. Anyone else? Anyone that I've missed? Councillor Ali? In favour. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else we've missed? No? Right, so this is the vote on the amendment, and the vote is 31 in support of the amendment and 21 against with 1 abstention. Okay, so the amendment is carried. So we now move to the motion, to vote on the motion as amended with the amendment. So we're now voting on the original motion, but as amended. Okay, so if we can just vote on that as well. It's agreed. Okay, is that agreed across council? Okay, that's agreed. We now move on to the second motion then, which is the motion on scrapping the two-child benefit cap. And I will call on Councillor Morrissey to move this motion, to be seconded by Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm extremely frustrated and concerned once again that I'm bringing to Council a motion looking for support to abolish the two-child benefit cap. If anyone does require reminding of this vicious policy, which has been described as the worst ever social security policy in a crowded field, going back to the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, morally odious and vindictively conceived, the supposed aim was, in the view of the Conservative Party, to bring to heel imagined hordes of lazy, feckless, recklessly breeding, welfare scroungers to force them to get a job. So, what has happened since 2017? What are the huge benefits to the economy of this policy? Well, 4.3 million children now live in poverty in the UK, 100,000 more than last year, and the figure is growing. Repeated evaluations have proved it has failed to persuade poorer families to have less children and work more hours. And in practice, its main function has been to push working families into poverty, as more than half of those affected by the two-child limit are in work, and made it less likely non-working parents moved into employment. The policy has affected an estimated 1.5 million children and has impoverished families rather than increasing employment. About 1 in 10 of all UK children, which is 1.5 million, are currently affected by the two-child limit. Of these, 1.1 million are in poverty. The main impact of the policy has been to become the biggest single driver of child poverty. A recent study found that as many as 1 in 4 children in some of our English constituencies are in families left at least £3,250 a year poorer by the policy. It also found that in the most ethnically diverse communities, 14% of children were hit by the cap. Local child poverty rates correlate very strongly with the percentage of families affected by the two-child cap, indicating that the controversial policy is a key factor behind children growing up in deprivation. Which brings me to why I'm even more frustrated and angry this evening. Even though we may be on the threshold of a Labour government, I thought I would have heard a cheer then, this policy, described by both Angela Rayner as obscene and inhumane, and Keir Starmer himself as a punitive sanction, will not be abolished as part of an iron devotion to a spending discipline. A Labour Party which was founded to represent the interests and needs of the urban working class is not representing the needs and interests of our children. Abolishing the cap would cost £1.3 billion a year, less than 1% of the welfare bill, and would lift 250,000 children out of poverty, and a further 850,000 would be in less deep poverty. It is by far the most cost-effective way of reducing the number of children living in poverty. Unspecified reforms are no substitute for urgently needed public investment. It's not for me to suggest solutions as to how a Labour government could fund a properly functioning child benefit system. However, I can suggest a contact who has included abolishing this regressive, punitive, discriminatory policy in a fully costed manifesto. I urge members to support my motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Morrissey. Councillor Austin.
I do wholeheartedly support Councillor Christine Morrissey's motion calling for the Council to write to the newly elected members of Parliament to urge them to ask the government to remove this unfair child benefit cap that was introduced in 2017. It's worrying that over 1/3 of children and young people living in our city are living in poverty. This unfair cap simply needs to go. This cap is one of the worst around the world. We are the only other country to have this cap is Vietnam. In a recent report that was only published last week, it found that our city had the highest rate of children living in poverty, and this rate is linked closely to the percentage of families affected by the two-child benefit cap. We all know residents who are struggling because of this. Whilst talking to a resident just last week, she mentioned how this cap's affected her. I urge everybody in this council chamber to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. I think yet again that's a maiden speech, is that right? So perhaps a little show of appreciation from Councillor. Now, I have two amendments to this motion, unusually one coming from the same Lib Dem group. Is that right, Councillor Ferguson? Are you moving an amendment to be seconded by Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, perhaps a little bit odd that the Liberal Democrats are amending a Liberal Democrat motion, but for the avoidance of doubt, Councillor Morrissey had wanted to bring this amendment herself, and due to procedural rules, I've had to do it for her. The reason for our amendment is simply because time moves on, and when we usually have council meetings that regularly run past the guillotine, which I don't think we're going to do tonight, and motions get pushed back and back. Sometimes they get ever so slightly out of date whenever we roll them over. None of us was expecting to be in a position of having a general election, so the amendment tries to capture the fact that we are in a general election and that whenever this motion was originally written, we did know who we were going to be writing to. At this point in time, perhaps we don't. Just to reinforce, though, what my colleagues have said, which I think is vitally important, there are 38% of children living in poverty in Newcastle, which is the third highest in the region, according to the End Child Poverty Coalition. The region has actually gone from 6th to 2nd across the country in 10 years. Loughborough University has issued a study just recently, I think last week, indicating that there's an incredibly strong correlation between child poverty in an area and the number of families affected by the two-child benefit cap. The Child Poverty Action Group argues that abolishing the two-child limit is the most cost-effective way of reducing child poverty. The cap has no obvious effect on fertility rates, and 58% of the affected families are already working. I noted that in Barnsley last month, Labour and the Lib Dems came together on this vital issue, so I hope that the Chamber can put hungry kids first and make it clear to the national parties that they should be sending a very strong message across the political spectrum that Newcastle and our region want to see genuine change to end the scourge of child poverty. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Burns. Yes. Reserve the right to speak. Okay. We have a second amendment here to be moved by Councillor Mains and seconded by Councillor Frew. Is that correct?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't dispute any of the figures or facts that have been spoken about prior to myself, and it is a truly terrible situation that we are in terms of child poverty. But I did just want to note within my amendment is that obviously Newcastle Labour have consistently opposed the term limit to benefit payments and are committed to supporting our residents to access support they need, providing things like the Holiday Activity Fund, for example, which provides activity as well as healthy food, and the great family hubs that we have across the city. I do obviously note that the Liberal Democrats themselves have opposed it and have asked for it to be axed as well. But we do have to recognise that the council does support a lot of its residents, and child poverty is taken extremely seriously, and that not only do our welfare services make sure that families get the maximum that they are entitled to, but also our wonderful staff in places like children's services and schools. We also have an extremely effective system in place to make sure that we identify children and families who are entitled to free school meals. So I don't know what's coming out in the manifesto tomorrow, fingers crossed, but Council will resolve to write to the people who will be in power from the 4th, and Council resolves to ask Cabinet to work with a financial inclusion group to highlight the impact of this child benefit cap and consider ways that we can further increase uptake of free school meals and how we can work together to alleviate the suffering of lots of children in our city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mains. Councillor Frew, second.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And to echo my colleague's point, I think it's a bit redundant to talk about plans that are not yet public, specifically Labour Party's plans for welfare. They are not out, so we will see what they are. But what I think is really important is that we can't just talk about these things in isolation. The two-child limit is a part of a wider welfare reform that was forced onto the country by a coalition government. Universal credit itself was a cost-saving exercise, and that the two-child limit was simply an extension of this. At the time, the Liberal Democrats were perfectly happy to go along with cost savings on the welfare bill. And I have heard no proposals from the Liberal Democrat Party for any of the cuts that were made at the time, because universal credit was a massive real terms cut for people who are receiving support. The Labour Party can be very proud of its record in government nationally on the work that was done with tax credits. And I'd say that throughout the time that universal credit has been with us, I've supported many people who have had extreme difficulties with the system. It is purposefully remote, it is purposefully difficult, it is purposefully mean, and it needs significant reforms. And will the Liberal Democrat Party ever apologise for their role in creating this system? Locally, we have had to have a full city response to welfare reform since 2011. Work done locally through the Welfare Rights Service. We have welfare rights officers who are delivering £1 million per year of unclaimed benefits for our residents. £1 million per officer. We have a task force on welfare reform and have had a whole city response working with our Advice Compact and other partners in the city, all necessary because of the impositions of central government, which the Liberal Democrat Party took part in. I will also say that, not isolating this from everything else that families have to deal with, we need to deal with childcare. And a good plan around that would be something like 3,000 new nursery classes, 500,000 children,
30 seconds.
500,000 children achieving early learning goals by 2030, and saving families saving families thousands of pounds per year on the childcare that they need before their children are at school. So I'm quite happy to support the amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frew. I don't have any other speakers, but I do have Councillor Burns, who reserved the right to speak on the First Amendment. If you'd like to speak on that amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The two-child benefit cap was introduced in 2017. The Lib Dems have a costed plan for reversing it. Perhaps the local Labour leadership could ask the new North East Mayor, who has made ending child poverty a fundamental priority, to come out publicly to challenge the national leadership to commit to abolishing the two-child cap.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burns. Very concise. Thanks very much indeed. And then back to Councillor Morrissey. Do you have any summing up points that you'd like to make on your motion?
We are more together with what we agree with than what separates us. And we've said this many times before regarding child poverty in this chamber. But this particular policy is the biggest single driver of child poverty. Over and over again, we can go on forever quoting universities and policy makers and whoever who say this. So we have a chance at this point now to do something about it. We know we're going to have a new government very soon. I'm sure we all know who that's going to be. We've got members sitting opposite. You must have friends in the NEC. You must have people who you can say, we want change. We've got to change. We've got to come together and agree that change has to happen, and how that can happen is in your hands, not in ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrissey. Thank you. Right, we now move to the complexities of the voting. What we'll do is we'll first of all vote on the First Amendment, which was moved by Councillor Ferguson. So we are voting on the First Amendment now. Councillors, if you'd like to register your vote. And in the same way as previously, people who can't use Go Vote, if you can raise your hand and shout out loudly whether you are for or against the amendment. Okay, anybody who can't go vote, if you can raise your hand. We've got Councillor Cairns. Your vote is against, yeah? Councillor Ali, again? Sorry? You're against as well? Anyone else on this side? Anyone else who can't do the go vote? On this side, anyone else who can't register the go vote? No? No? Have we got all the votes now? Have we got all the votes? Well, hang on. Are we? Okay. I think you better settle out this internally within your group. Anyway, the vote as it stands at the moment is 22 in favour, 33 against, so that amendment falls. That amendment is not carried. We'll now move on to the second amendment. And that was the amendment that was moved by Councillor Ali. Can we have a vote on the second amendment now, please? And in the same way, people who can't go vote, if you can raise your hand and shout out. Councillor Cairns at the back, in favour. Councillor Ali here, in favour. Anyone else? Have we sorted ourselves out on this side as well? Everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Yes, yes, okay. So we've got 31 in favour, 20 against and 1 abstention, so that amendment is carried. So we now move to the original motion as amended, and that's the second amendment, the one moved by Councillor Ali, and we're voting on that now, the motion as amended. Sorry? Somebody calling a named vote? Sorry? Sorry, was it moved by Councillor Mains? Sorry, okay. So we're now voting on the second amendment, on the motion as amended with the second amendment, so we can vote on that, please. Agreed? That's agreed. Not agreed. So we want to vote. Okay, let's move to the vote, because there is some dissension on that. Councillor Cairns? Agreed. Councillor Ali? Yes, agreed. Anyone else? Anyone else? No? No? Got the vote? Yes. Okay, well that's 35 in favour. This is the motion as amended with the second amendment. 35 in favour, 19 abstentions. So the motion as amended with the second amendment is carried. Thank you very much, Council. We now move on to something perhaps a bit more straightforward. This is item 11 on the agenda, which is the Unison's Year of LGBT plus workers motion, to be moved by Councillor Kilgour and seconded by Councillor Barry Stanners.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As a proud member of Unison, I'm delighted to bring this motion to Council tonight. Unison recognises the importance of visibility and solidarity with our LGBT plus comrades, hence the Year of the LGBT plus worker. Particularly important given that prejudice and discrimination against LGBT plus people is increasing, incited by government rhetoric and fuelled by the far right. The rights of our LGBT plus communities and of transgender people in particular have been politicised, indeed weaponised by the Conservative Party and others. It is dog whistle politics. It is disgraceful, and we must stand shoulder to shoulder in pushing back against these divisive and regressive policies. It is shocking to see the UK falling in the rankings of the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association's Rainbow Map, which ranks 49 European countries on their respective legal and policy practices for LGBT plus people, dropping from, I think, 5th at one point to 17th now. And let us not forget that in 64 countries across the globe, consensual same-sex relationships are criminalised, and that in 11 of those countries, the death penalty can be applied to those in same-sex relationships, and that at least 14 countries have laws explicitly criminalising transgender people. Only 33 countries recognise same-sex marriage. And our LGBT plus colleagues, indeed our friends, our family members, need straight allies. Allies who will fight for and with them and defend their rights in the face of hostility and right-wing populism. Allies who will prevent the rollback of those rights in the way we're seeing in countries like America and, sadly, here. As I've said in this chamber before, I'm old enough to have protested against Section 28. Let us never forget the shame and hurt caused by that disgraceful piece of legislation and make sure we never see its like passed into law again. When LGBT plus communities are losing rights all over the world and still experience discrimination and stigma here at home, until they feel safe and valued and equal, then solidarity with them is essential. Trade unions gain their strength from solidarity and collective action, from working together to tackle problems and represent their members' interests. Unison's Year of the LGBT plus worker is just one demonstration of this. And I'm proud to say that Newcastle City Council already largely meets Unison's checklist for LGBT plus workers. And between us, we will ensure we meet all areas in the near future. We are proud to have been recognised as an inclusive employer for many years in recognition of areas such as our strong LGBT plus staff network group, our inclusive policies such as gender identity and paid time off for individuals transitioning, our recognition for non-traditional families in accessing our family-friendly policies, refreshed equalities, diversity and inclusion training is soon to be rolled out to all staff, and EDI is a key part of the induction process that all new employees attend in their first few months in post. And of course, we celebrate and commemorate key events each year which are significant for our LGBT plus colleagues and communities, such as Pride and International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. Lord Mayor, we have much to be proud of here in Newcastle and at the Council, but we can never be complacent. We want the council to be a workplace where all our employees can happily be themselves, where they feel supported and valued. Committing to Unison's checklist is a further step towards achieving that. I move the motion, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kilgar. Councillor Barry-Stanners, yes, if you'd like to second the motion.
The light shocking. Thank you, Lord Mayor. As both a long-standing member of Unison and as a proud openly gay man, I'm very proud to be stood here to use my maiden speech to Council to second this motion. As a council, we have a proud record of being an inclusive workplace. In 2020, Stonewall Charity named Newcastle City Council its Employee of the Year, becoming the first ever local authority to receive this prestigious award. And while we're extremely proud of our record on the way that we deal with inclusivity, we recognise that there's more to do in order to ensure that our LGBT+ colleagues feel safe and valued. This is why this motion is so important, and we've brought it to Council today. My colleague, Councillor Kilgour, has already set out many of the ways that as a council we work to make it as inclusive as possible. So I won't repeat any of that. What I will use my remaining time for speaking is why this motion is so important still. According to an LGBT in Britain report by Stonewall, looking into the barriers that LGBT+ workers face in the workplace, 35% of workers have hidden that they are LGBT at work for fear of discrimination. 38% of bisexual people aren't out in the workplace, again because of fear. 26% of trans people in the workplace aren't open with anyone at work about being trans. And this number increases to 37% if you include non-binary people. And shockingly, 18% of LGBT+ workers have been the target of negative comments or conduct within the workplace by colleagues because they are LGBT+. These figures show that all workplaces need to do more and need to work harder to be inclusive and break down barriers faced by LGBT+ workers. And this is why Unison's Year of LGBT+ workers is so important. As one of the major employees in the city, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're leading by example and to work collaboratively with our friends and colleagues in Unison to ensure that our policies are aligned with their recommendations and to support them and all LGBT+ people, not just throughout this year, but always. Lord Mayor, I formally second this motion.
I'm reminded also, Councillor Barry-Stanners, that is your maiden speech. So well said, a very personal speech. You've also reminded us to improve the lighting by the microphone as well. I have two speakers for this, Councillor Penny Evans and Councillor Ferguson, if you'd like to ready yourselves at the microphone. Yes, Councillor Penny Evans first and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think actually quite a lot has already been said that I'd written, so I don't want to go over too much. I'm also a proud Unison member, and I think Unison has a really good high track record of promoting equalities This year being the year of the LGBT plus worker actually builds upon the year previously of the black worker and the year before the year of the disabled worker. So it's a really strong commitment from Unison to work to achieve equalities across our workplaces. I think, as Councillor Kilgour said, it really is important now more than ever to actually show that you're also an ally of our LGBT plus community. The increasing discrimination and prejudice that's been fueled by the far right and our Tory government, hopefully for not much longer, really is disgraceful. And I think it was just recently Unison put out some information that hate crimes based on sexual orientation have more than doubled in the last 5 years. I think most people in this chamber will agree with me that everybody should feel safe and welcome to be who they are and feel included in all of their workplaces. And I think it's really important that we have brought this motion in Pride Month, because as we all know, Pride's not just about celebrating all the achievements that have been made, it's also a protest born out of resistance, and we need to continually work towards making sure that we don't make steps backwards on what we've achieved, but we push forward on this issue. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I still vividly remember when my best mate came out to me at school. I was the first person that he came out to. And I remember the difficulty that he had, the braveness that he must have had to have in telling me something really quite personal about himself at a time when in Northern Ireland growing up, being gay wasn't easy. Still isn't easy now, but it is certainly easier than it was then. I remember the friend who pretended to be his girlfriend. I remember the shenanigans that he had to engage in to try and hide a fundamental part of who he was. I also remember after we left school and finished university and got into the world of work, when he had to leave a job. Now, it ostensibly wasn't because of his sexuality, but it was certainly a coincidence that he had just recently come out to his employer, that his contract suddenly came to an end. Now, that was Northern Ireland and this is England, but we can't kid ourselves that things are fundamentally different. And whenever I think about the young people that I work with in my day job, particularly some of them who are gender questioning, the challenge they have in navigating the complexity that has arisen due to a thoroughly confected and unnecessary culture war over these issues, I find utterly appalling. So I was delighted to be able to attend the flag raising for the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. I recognise the incredibly good work that goes on here. I was reminded by one of my colleagues just before I stood up that there are still some little things I think we could work on, some council forms, for example, when gathering casework that still require residents to fill in quite a limited set of gender identities that frankly just don't need to be gathered at all for the sake of reporting a pothole. There is always more work to be done, and I'm sure that many of us will be at Pride in due course. I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Rahman, you've indicated you wish to speak on this as well. Okay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Kilgour for bringing this motion, and can I start by saying to Councillor Stanners, I also stand in solidarity with all members of the LGBTQ plus community, and I'm proud of the work that we do here in the city as a Stonewall Council. Now, I had the pleasure of joining colleagues in the Pride Festival a good few years ago, and over the past years, some of my work standing in unity and solidarity. And I'll reinforce the message, colleagues. This is the year of Unison's year of LGBT, but I think the pledge that we need to make is it's each and every year that we need to ensure no one is marginalized and no one is victimized. So I stand in solidarity with all my brothers and sisters from the LGBTQ plus community. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rahman. Thank you. And Councillor Kilgour, did you have any summing up comments?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to colleagues for their contributions and the cross-party support for the motion. This sends a strong message to our staff and communities in the city, so thank you again. Unison have kindly given me some of their rainbow lanyards, which I'm modelling this evening. If there are any members in the chamber who'd like one, please catch me at the end of the meeting. And I hope that you will all show your solidarity not only tonight, but at Pride, where we will have both a council banner, and I'm sure your trade unions, but certainly Unison will have their banners and will march alongside our LGBT plus colleagues and comrades. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kilgour. Is that motion agreed, Council? Agreed. Okay. We now move on to the next motion, which is item 12 on the agenda, and it is a motion in relation to Urban Green to be moved by Councillor Ferguson, and I think there's a change of seconder to Councillor Stone. So if you can move the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Back again. Lees's Park opened on the 23rd of December 1873, 16 years after 3,000 working men petitioned for ready access to some open ground for the purpose of health and recreation. It was the first of the city's parks. Armstrong Park was gifted to the people of Newcastle in 1878. Elsick Park dates back to 1881. The list goes on. That's just a few. We in this chamber are custodians of the city's green spaces on behalf of the people. We have been custodians for over 125 years. We should not carry that responsibility lightly. The precise legal structure matters little to the principle of that responsibility, but it should be made clear that the Liberal Democrats in Newcastle opposed the creation of the then Newcastle Parks and Allotments Trust and continue to do so. We queried the business rationale then. What to make of it now? Urban Green claims that they will have a cumulative deficit of £6.7 million, predicted over the next 5 years. The council issued just over £1 million of bridging funding for 2024-25. The original seed funding has been drawn down early, none remains. The question we have of where we go from here is beyond the scope of this motion. So too, to a certain extent, is the question of how we got here. However, it is surely the case that the council's role in the governance of Urban Green strikes to the heart of both matters. The council is entitled to appoint 2 representatives to the board. Initially, these were elected members, the duly appointed representatives of the residents of the city. On the 25th of May 2022, shortly after the reconfigured cabinet took up office, Labour removed elected members from the board. We have a duty and responsibility to the people who elect us to represent their interests. For something as vital as our city's parks, that should be elected members, with the responsibility and authority to speak on the council's behalf. This council wrote the constitution with that intention clearly in mind. The cabinet of July 2017, of which councillors Kemp and Kilgour were both members, clearly thought that representation was important and voted for that model. So it should remain, for so long as we have to have an independent trust managing our great parks. We should have seen this crisis for our parks coming. We should be at the table dealing with the solution. It is not enough to say that the council's 2 members don't hold overall control. It is not enough to say that others can do that job for them. If we want more control, as this council has stated, we should take what's available to us. We are custodians of the city's green spaces on behalf of the people. We must be custodians for the next 125 years. I urge Council to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am always proud to be the voice of my community in this chamber, and I'm especially proud tonight to be the voice of Councillor Huddart, who was down originally to second this, and I'm going to read her remarks out in her stead. The recent announcements from the Council about the proposed rescue package related to the financial status of Urban Green raises important questions about how Urban Green organises its affairs, how it reports on its financial situation, how open and transparent it is, what is the role, as Councillor Ferguson has said, of the non-executive members, especially those appointed by this council? Is it just to rubber stamp decisions, or do they have a wider, more challenging remit? How this state of affairs has now come to light now in 2024? Why were these problems not identified months, if not years ago? And was appropriate and effective scrutiny in place? A council scrutiny call-in was requested on this decision, which might have had shed greater light onto this matter, and it is in our view regrettable that the monitoring officer did not allow this to take place. Council should be aware that the loan extended and the estimated consultants fee represent council funds funded by council taxpayers. This use of financial reserves comes at a time when the takeover of YHN has attracted a warning from the Director of Resources that money is tight. We might question why the council has chosen to commit its reserves to this bailout and not, for example, to refurbish a swathe of council void properties to bring them back into use for families on a lengthy housing waiting list. We know our citizens value the city's green spaces. They deserve to be better looked after than has been the case of the Spinney in my ward, where Urban Green has not delivered on commitments on maintenance and improvements. They deserve to be looked after for current and future generations. And this is why councillors and the public deserve to be able to question how an effective park service can continue to be delivered and what the financial implications for the council might be. In particular, we ask the question of whether the council administration can offer a view as to whether the options under consideration will include allowing large swathes of our park to be left to become natural wilderness areas. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. I have 3 speakers named, 2 already poised at the microphones by the look of it. Councillors Kemp, Councillor Frew and Councillor Avai. Is that how have I got the pronunciation correct? Avai, yes, I have. Okay, well, I'll call on Councillor Frew first of all then to speak.
Councillor
Him first.
It's myself, Councillor Higgins. It's me first.
Okay then, Councillor Kemp, whatever.
Well, that's... Okay, Lord Mayor, I'm speaking against the motion before us. For context, the establishment of a charitable trust followed extensive research, and legal and financial advice indicated that Urban Green could achieve self-sufficiency over time through income generation. The majority of funding was always intended to be used within the first 5 years. As a result of COVID, the small remaining council funding for years 6 to 10 was brought forward to 23-24. When the last tranche of funding was agreed, there was no indication from Urban Green of a continuing financial ask of the council. When the request for ongoing support was received, 6.915 million over this 5-year period, the CFO's initial view was that it was due to growth in Urban Green activities. Urban Green made it clear that without council further financial support, they would have to hand back leases to the council within a matter of months. This clearly posed significant risk of higher costs to the council. The Chief Financial Officer consulted Cabinet to offer a provisional 1-year amount of 1.26 million to Urban Green and to commission a review into future options. The rationale for this decision was that the option to fund the organisation whilst undertaking the review presented better value for money than the alternative that the organisation simply handed back the keys and the City Council was clearly not in a position to take on the responsibilities of the parks and therefore was a prudent financial decision. The purpose of the external review is to assess the structural options now available to the Council for investing in its parks and allotments, including assessing whether Urban Green's delivery model represents value for money for the Council taxpayers when compared with other structural options. The funding initially agreed for Urban Green was set up as a subsidy, which meant that the Council had no control over how this funding was used, these decisions being made by Urban Green's board. The principle of more control is around more or different conditions attached to council funding. Councillors are proposed for representation on a wide range of different boards every year as part of the annual meeting. No explanation is given for individual processes in this process. In 2022, no councillors were formally appointed to the Urban Green Board. Officers were appointed instead, and that supports the nature of the involvement and attention the council needed to give to Urban Green.
30 seconds, Councillor.
The council is not required to appoint directors, trustees to the Board of Urban Green. It is allowed to appoint them. Anyone who is appointed to the board will owe duties to the company as a director, and their primary responsibility is to that organisation. It is therefore always necessary to consider whether the person who is appointed can carry out their role effectively and also meet their duties to the company. This is particularly the case with elected members who are responsible for policy making at the council. As I've already made clear, and as the motion itself notes, a review is being undertaken, so it would be inappropriate to predetermine the outcome of the review and any recommendations of governance for Urban Green. I therefore urge Council to reject the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I now turn to Councillor Avayi, if you would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the passion and dedication to Urban Green staff and volunteers who are working tirelessly to maintain our parks and green spaces. Despite their efforts, we routinely receive concerns from residents regarding the appearance and maintenance of sites managed by Urban Green. We need to ensure that our city presents itself as tidy and proud, especially to visitors who come to our city for major cultural and sporting events. Another concern that comes up in discussion with residents is vermin infestation in unmaintained Urban Green sites. This is a valid concern that we must address proactively. Regular inspections and appropriate pest control measures can help mitigate this risk. While we strive for biodiversity, we must also ensure the safety and comfort of our residents. Residents have also highlighted the importance of well-maintained green spaces for physical exercise, particularly for our children. As we work towards making our city greener, we must ensure that we are not reducing the availability of recreational spaces. In an era where child obesity is a growing concern, we need to provide ample opportunities for our children to play and exercise outdoors. My final point is about the transparency of Urban Green Newcastle and the use of funds secured for conservation and management. It is crucial that we maintain transparency and accountability in all our operations. The residents have the right to know how the funds are being used and whether they are being used effectively. We need to ensure that the funds are being used for their intended purpose and that they are having a positive impact on our green spaces. The bottom line is that protected species are being harmed as a result of lack of management and habitats are being degraded. Considering these points, I support Councillor Ferguson's motion to ask the Cabinet to reconsider the removal of elected member representation on Urban Greens Board, in line with the expectations from our residents. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you very much, Councillor Avayi. And now, Councillor Frew.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's quite difficult to keep up with the Liberal Democrats talking out of both sides of their mouths. We just heard a speech where it started off with commendations to the staff and then went to put the boot in. We've heard from Councillor Ferguson about how passionately they opposed the whole thing, and I have sat on scrutiny and audit and asked questions about governance with external partners, specifically Urban Green, for quite a while, and I had no support from the members opposite in asking those questions. I asked for a specific piece of work to the chair about this, and I never received any support. So where was that opposition then? When was that concern relevant? It seems to only be relevant when it's politically opportune. Now, what is this review really about? The Urban Green was set up to steward parts of the green space in the city as an independent charity. And that part's really important because it can leverage in finances that the council would not otherwise have access to. That independence is important, and I'm not sure Councillor Ferguson has quite understood how key that part is, and that is the business plan. Now, having gone through COVID and the cost of living crisis, that business plan is obviously different. Every business plan has changed as a result of the past 5 years. And it is worth a review whether that still works and what needs to change. So this is about checking whether it is still fit for purpose, given the changes that have happened in the world today, and not throw out the baby with the bathwater, which it seems the opposition may want to do. I'm not sure. So the question is, does Urban Green draw in cash that the council can't actually access? Are they commercial in a way that is not accessible to the council? Does it require a level of permanent funding because of the changes to their costs and because of changes to behaviour that several years ago we would never have been able to anticipate? These are the relevant questions that the review needs to answer, and then a further solution be devised. But let's be really clear that a partial win would still be a win in this case. If Urban Green is capable of pulling in cash that the council can't, and the Urban Green is saving the council money, then will the Liberal Democrats then be supportive of it, or will they continue putting in the boot? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frew. And back to Councillor Ferguson for summing up.
Lord Mayor, I'm somewhat bemused to hear how comprehensive Cabinet's understanding of what's going on in Urban Green is now, given that they didn't see this coming previously. You've obviously been doing your homework, but no matter. One comment, and one comment only, please bear with me. The Armstrong Centre Company, the Biker Community Trust, Centre for Life Board, Centre West Newcastle Limited, the Eldon Square Company, the Exhibition and Brandling Parks Community Trust, the International Newcastle Community Interest Company, Mia Trust, Newcastle upon Tyne Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust, Northern Stage Limited, St Mary Magdalene and Holy Jesus Trust, the Taylor's Educational Foundation, the Thomas Thompson Poor Rate Gift for the People of Biker, Tyne Theatre and Opera House Preservation Trust, the William Moulton Non-Ecclesiastical Charity, and at the moment, the YHM Board. Is there anybody in the chamber who's good at Only Connect? Do you know what binds all of these organisations? They are organisations where the perceived conflict of interest from elected members sitting on their boards is not a problem. Would you like to know where there is a problem? Urban Green Newcastle. Lord Mayor, the comparison speaks for itself. Council, we should have elected members on that board. You know what you need to do.
Councillor Kemp, did you wish to raise a point of order? Yes? Would you like to go to the microphone?
As we frequently receive the sermons from Councillor Sermon about accuracy, then I hope it will be credible to acknowledge that half of the organisations which Councillor Ferguson very carefully ran through, quite a number of them have completely different areas of responsibility, and people are not trustees. So I think it might be helpful to just be accurate in presentation, please, Lord Mayor. So actually a number of them do not have trustees and trustees' responsibilities and liabilities. Many of them are very different, and they're simply council appointments and representations. I think there is a good point, Councillor Ferguson, before you just indicate, is that we did say, and we have agreed, and we've had conversations with you cross-party about a review of standing orders, etc.
I think you've made your point there. It was about what you're saying is it's about accuracy in relation to the way that Councillor Ferguson referred to it. Shall we try and keep it brief, if possible, Councillor Ferguson?
Lord Mayor, I am happy to accept that Councillor Kemp agrees that at least some of those organisations, the criticism is valid, and all we're deciding upon is where to draw the line. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we do have is disagreements across the council chamber from time to time. But anyway, can we move to the vote on this particular motion, which is fairly straightforward because there aren't any amendments. So we're now voting on the motion in relation to Urban Green. Councillor Stone, I can't make out what you're saying. Oh, right, okay. I'll get round to that in a second, okay. Anybody who can't use the go vote, then if you can raise your hand and speak very loudly whether you're for or against the motion. Let's get the go vote sorted first, right? Okay, now then, Councillor Stone, you're for the motion. Okay, Councillor Rahman? You're voting for the motion. Anyone else on this side of the council chamber? This side, Councillor Cairns at the back. Voting against. Anyone else? Councillor Ali? Are you voting for or against the motion? Against the motion. Okay. We've got all the votes in now, have we? Right, so the result is 20 votes in favour, 31 votes against and 1 abstention, so the motion is not carried. Okay, and we now move on then to item 13, which is the final motion this evening. The Care Act 10 years on, to be moved by Councillor Taylor, and I think we have Councillor Morrissey as a substitute for Councillor Huddart, who is... Oh no, is it Councillor Burns? Yes, Councillor Morrissey had to leave because she was feeling unwell. Right, so it's Councillor Burns. Okay, right, so you're the second substitution. Yes. All right, Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, we seem to have a fair amount of sickness in the Dem group this evening. Lord Mayor, 10 years ago, the government introduced landmark legislation designed to improve access to vital care and support with the aim of focusing on well-being and prevention. It was based on work done by the Law Commission and the Dilnot Commission and replaced a patchwork of legislation on adult social care that had built up since 1948. The care ministers who steered the Act through Parliament, Liberal Democrat MPs Paul Burstow and Norman Lamb, had high ambitions for this legislation. 10 years on, however, that ambition has not been met. A recent LGA survey showed that only around 2/3 of councils are confident of being able to meet all their legal duties under the Care Act by next year. This is despite 8 in 10 councils forecasting having to cut spending on other community services, such as parks, libraries and leisure, in a bid to try and protect care services. This is due to a large rise in people needing social care and support, together with massive cuts in council funding from an out-of-touch and soon-to-be extinct Tory government. In Newcastle alone, the gross expenditure per 100,000 adults has risen from 41.4 million in 2015-16 to 57.9 million in 22-23, an increase of 39.9%. However, the LGA's recent report, 10 years on, lays bare that the biggest issues facing adult social care are greater than just severe funding shortages. There are challenges around recruiting and retaining a care workforce, more people with complex needs, and an inability to invest in preventative services to help people live independent lives and avoid the need for more acute care. Norman Lamb, who was Care Minister from 2012 to 2015, said recently, "I had high hopes for the legislation. I hoped it would promote a cultural change alongside a shift to a more modern approach to how we effectively empower and support people who are in need of care. An approach reflected in the principles which underpin the legislation of choice and control, prevention, personalisation, and the promotion of well-being. Unfortunately, while the Act remains a significant and well-supported piece of legislation, its full intent and ambition has never been fully realised. First and foremost, there has been a failure to properly fund adult social care or consider how it is paid for. As an MP, I came across case after case of residents who draw on care having their personal budgets trimmed further and further back. These cuts to personal budgets meant that people, amongst other things, lost access to leisure activities and transport. This completely undermines the whole underlying approach and principles of the legislation to empower and give people freedom through choice and control. Social care desperately needs a new income stream, and sticking plasters are not the cure for an ailing system." Paul Burstow said, "While much great care continues to be provided, constrained budgets and rising demand have led to ever more rationing of services. It sometimes seems the only social care KPI that matters is hospital discharge, when the true litmus test should be whether a person's well-being has been promoted or not. Consequently, there has been a decline in provision of care packages, a backlog of assessments, and inadequate support for unpaid carers, despite their enhanced recognition under the Act. Now, I know that the Labour Party is committing to the introduction of a national care service, but what does this mean in practice? I believe their main policy for the short term is the development of a fair pay agreement for staff working in adult social care to improve pay and conditions across the sector in order to boost recruitment and retention, and of course this is vital. But will a Labour government bring forward the plans to cap people's lifetime personal care costs to £86,000 and raise the threshold below which people with unmet eligible needs are entitled to council funding care from £23,000 to £100,000? And if so, how will they fund it? The Tory government pushed back the plans to October 25 and has made no plans to implement the scheme. We'll have to wait and see. The Liberal Democrats have put care at the centre of our manifesto, with proposals to trial personal health care and social care budgets so that individuals are in control of what care they receive. So addressing the ongoing challenges in social care requires sincere efforts to transcend partisan divides to foster a cross-party consensus, and I sincerely hope the new government will make this happen. This motion supports the LGA's call for immediate investment in adult social care to tackle the urgent issues affecting the service, alongside a long-term care workforce plan, and it is vital that this is at the top of the in-tray for the incoming government. Let's get our residents needing care and those who care for them properly funded and get them the person-centred services they require.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion because Council should not forget the importance of good care and the invaluable work that our paid and indeed unpaid carers play in the well-being of our less able citizens. Also, this is Carers Week, which is being recognised in various ways across the nation. As has been mentioned by Councillor Taylor, the number of elderly and disabled people requiring some form of care has escalated over recent decades. And of course, alongside, so has the cost to us all. Councillor Huddart was recalling some years ago when she was involved in the establishment of a new day hospital, which was intended to provide care and treatment to relieve acute care inpatient services. Of the first 100 referrals she recalls receiving, 86 were for very elderly people. This demonstrated the clear need and gave Councillor Huddart and colleagues the impetus to lobby for the development of new elderly day care services. It's also important to emphasise the role the Care Act gave to local authorities for the provision of information, advice and services to provide that very vital care support. These services are needed to promote independence and keep residents in their own home environment as long as possible. We would have to say, though, unfortunately, many people don't actually know what services or help they're entitled to and can expect. This can lead to disappointment or them simply not taking up their entitlements. Providing information and care at a time of increasing austerity, alongside our ongoing social and economic inequalities and growing demand, provides endless challenges to not just this City Council, but to the whole of the voluntary sector. There are some 5 to 6 million people acting as unpaid carers for a loved one or neighbour, resulting in negative effects on their own physical and mental health, their jobs, finances and relationships. My own mother spent over a decade caring for her elderly parents, and the physical and emotional demands of that were immense, and she herself was a woman in her 70s. This kind of care is extremely hard work.
30 seconds, Councillor Burns.
Deserves better recognition, be that understanding or financial, social, emotional support. And it's also important that we recognise the role of thousands of paid carers too. The Care Act was important legislation, and looking forward to a new government, we must hope that they listen to the voices from the voluntary sector and local government that more action is needed to improve care services. Please support the motion.
Councillor Burns, thank you very much. We now have an amendment to this motion to be moved by Councillor Walker and seconded by Councillor Kilgour.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Taylor for bringing this important and timely motion to Council tonight and recognising the incredible hard work and dedication of our adult social care teams, who every day are working tirelessly to make a significant difference to the lives of people with care and support needs across the city. Tonight's motion highlights a major issue that is facing not just our city, but the entire country. Adult social care is not a subject many people want to talk about, yet at some stage in all our lives, we or a loved one or someone we know will likely require the use of social care services. Often forgotten about as a problem for future generations or kicked into the long grass as too difficult an issue to tackle, for many the thought of adult social care isn't a problem for them. They're young, fit and healthy. Only when circumstances change are people confronted with it. Maybe a loved one needs long-term care due to an illness or accident. Maybe it's finding out their child is autistic and what will be their life as they grow up and we grow older. Suddenly it's at the forefront of their mind, but this needs to change. We must have a conversation about this, and this topic should be front and centre for each and every one of us now. The Care Act was a welcome piece of legislation that started a conversation around adult social care and was the first step in focusing on the needs of the person rather than the service. It seems completely alien to me that this wasn't the case previously. In what other walk of life would we accept the design of a service or product that benefited the provider but not the user? Adult social care is a vital service that is fundamental to the well-being of our city. We want Newcastle to be a healthy, caring city for all. To achieve this, we want to support people to live the lives they want to live by fostering thriving communities, promoting independence, prioritising well-being and keeping people safe from harm. Despite the challenging national backdrop of reducing resources and increasing demand, we have worked hard to transform services locally to ensure people are safe, supported and can live fulfilling independent lives while preventing, reducing and delaying need. We need to recruit more and retain more staff throughout the sector, a Herculean task given the challenges we face today, with reports of over 10% of care worker roles currently unfilled. Not to mention the thousands of unpaid carers trying to juggle caring for loved ones whilst battling for every bit of help and support that they can get. Without adequate funding, this is being made increasingly difficult. We're all aware and see every day the consequences that austerity has had on local authority funding. Newcastle City Council have been forced to make £369 million worth of cuts, which people can see every day in their local services. Potholes, less grass cutting, fewer waste collections, the list is endless. Now imagine you're needing specialist care. These cuts are felt just as deeply, but their effects, whilst profound, are largely away from view. Adult social care wasn't and isn't protected from austerity, with savings in the region of £65 million required in the last decade alone. Yet demand continues to increase, as does the complexity of need, creating even more pressure on the service. So whilst I welcome the Care Act and the ambitions it hoped to achieve, let us not forget the reason it hasn't been as transformative as originally hoped, that social care has been chronically underfunded in this country. We heard for years from successive coalition and Conservative governments about fixing the roof whilst the sun was shining. Fixing the roof? They've stolen the roof and waded in, leaving local authorities to pick up the bill, leaving our residents worse off and many councils on the brink. No longer should we pay the price for central government mismanagement. No longer should we be subjected to inadequate funding and support. It is right that local authorities have the control to run services that best support our residents, but this shouldn't be ad hoc to the terms of the government of the day. This motion tonight calls on the new Health Secretary to make adult social care a priority and linchpin of the next government, to work with and listen to local authorities so we can provide the best service possible without us having one hand tied behind our backs as we do today. I'm proud to move this amendment and I urge colleagues from across the chamber to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Kilgour.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillors Taylor and Walker for bringing this motion and amendment tonight. The Care Act 2014 was a significant and welcome piece of legislation underpinned by an overarching purpose of promoting individual well-being. It brought about changes to safeguarding adults' work, set national eligibility criteria, introduced rights of advocacy, gave carers rights to assessments, and required councils to provide preventative services. The aspirations of the Act were welcome and are embedded in work across adult social care in Newcastle. But without primacy of place and proper funding, our achievements are constrained. And therein lies the fundamental problem. The Act was introduced at the height of the coalition government's austerity programme. Here in Newcastle, we have embedded the ethos of the Act while coping with huge cuts, which social care sadly has not been immune from. Coupled with population growth, increased demand and increased complexity of need, we've had a perfect storm leading to a national crisis in social care. The Health Foundation estimates that an extra £9 billion is needed between now and 2032 to meet future need alone, with £26.4 billion needed to meet future need, make improvements in access to care and cover the full cost of care in that same period. Coupled with that, we've seen severe recruitment and retention challenges in the social care workforce, which undermines the Care Act's emphasis on person-centred care, choice and individual control. Locally, we've addressed this, at least in part, through our Real Living Wage employer accreditation. We know, of course, that the biggest impact of this has been on our commissioned care staff. So it was a real shame, actually, to get some pushback on our Real Living Wage commitment during the budget process from the other side of the chamber. Lord Mayor, the LGA is right to call for immediate investment in adult social care to tackle the urgent issues affecting services alongside a long-term care workforce plan. And I agree with them that the Care Act remains the right legal framework for care and support. I'm hugely proud of adult social care services and the people who deliver them in Newcastle. But like everyone here, I hope, I know that we could do so much more if only social care was funded adequately and sustainably, allowing councils to deliver the very best services co-produced with the people who draw on that social care support. Adult social care needs urgent attention from any incoming government, and I sincerely hope that the new Secretary of State for Health and Social Care will work with local government to ensure that it gets the attention and the funding it needs. I second the amendment, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kilgour. Back to Councillor Taylor. Any final comments? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor. Oh, yes, I've just reminded, I've got two speakers here, sorry. I've got Councillor Frew and Councillor Mitchell. Would you say whether you're speaking in support of the amendment or the motion, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Speaking in favour of the amendment. I'll try to keep it quick so we can all get home. So I really welcome the motion and the amendment. We've had repeated promises from governments about fixing funding for social care, but there is no quick fix, and the Labour Party has been very clear that we have to be committed to a long-term solution that will take a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of reform. What it means for us in Newcastle is that about 2/3 of the council's budget is about care in one way or another. And that means that those resources are competing with other parts of the council, the nice-to-haves, when we have a statutory job to do. And families with elderly or disabled relatives should feel comfortable in the knowledge that the resources are there for their families, that the resources are there according to their needs. And that they deserve more than the statutory minimum. And austerity has driven a general trend in local government towards finding what that statutory minimum is. And when local authorities say they're not sure if they can meet those, that's because they keep having to make cuts and they're not sure where the they're not sure where the line is drawn on that risk and when they will see a challenge in terms of the plans that people have. So what we do need is a fundamental reform in the way this is funded. We need it to be based on the needs of people receiving care. It needs to be not based on local property taxes, and it needs to be not competing with the resources allocated to other services. We also need to continue driving standards for care workers, and as Councillor Kilgour stole my thunder, we have been working very hard locally on this through implementing the real living wage, an approximately £6 million a year commitment to people on the lowest wages in the city. We are very proud of that and very successful in hosting the Living Wage Places Conference last week. It was very inconsiderate of the Prime Minister to land the pre-election period on top of that, so we couldn't shout about it more. But also, locally, a very strong commitment to supporting independence and repeated innovation in helping people remain in their homes, helping people remain in their communities. So I strongly support all of the speeches that have been presented today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frew. Councillor Mitchell.
Dear Lord Mayor, I'm speaking for the motion. In 2015, my dad broke his hip and never recovered physically. Once out of hospital, my dad needed care. He'd shown signs of forgetfulness, which became more pronounced after his operation, so he needed care for his mobility, remind him to take his medication, and with his personal care. The carers who came to his house was invaluable, especially as I had a young family and both of us were working. It gave me peace of mind he was getting his needs met. We did have our difficulties, especially as a test for dementia. My dad passed, apart from his short-term memory. So his stays in hospital were difficult, as often felt we were making up his memory loss. And it was the GP who really supported us and wrote a letter to show that my dad, who was an educated man, could often make himself look like he understood more than he did. In 2017, the CQC came to assess my dad as we needed more care. It was decided that he could get no extra funding because he sat quietly. He was described by everyone as a gentleman. His dementia, poor mobility, and his prostate cancer diagnosis was never considered, and it did put an enormous strain on us. A couple of weeks later, my dad had another fall through the night. The Freeman Hospital was amazing. They organised full-time care when he was discharged. And it was amazing that for the last 3 months of his life, I could spend time with my dad as his daughter and not worrying about household chores, just time with my dad and the carers who became like family. So it is frustrating to see that care work is seen as an unskilled job. That is so removed from the truth. Rishi Sunak said to make care workers valued, he would give them qualifications and professional training and development. That really shows how out of touch he is. I have worked in special education for over 25 years, which also includes social care. I have, as well as care workers across the country, a book of qualifications and certificates. I've been involved in life and death situations, giving emergency medication for epilepsy, diabetes and peg feeding. Care work is not just about making meals and chatting. It is a very skilled job and should be paid accordingly. This is one of the reasons why there is a shortage of staff, but also the stress the job entails, taking a huge toll on care workers. It is an emotionally and physically demanding job. Another issue is the competing budgets of NHS and social care. It means many patients are in hospital for longer than they should be, as each department argues who should pay for care. If it was much more integrated, it would be a more efficient and cost less money in the long run.
30 seconds, Councillor Mitchell.
Believe it or not, I do hope there is a change of government on July the 4th. Though I know there will be no quick fix for social care, I do urge a new government to look at social care and implement changes quickly, because at present social care is failing residents and staff. I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mitchell. Thank you. And I think I've got it right this time. It is Councillor Taylor for any summing up remarks.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased that all the speakers recognise the importance of the Care Act and also the wonderful work being done in our city, both by paid and unpaid carers, to look after our residents. But I would remind the group opposite that the Care Act would not have been introduced without Liberal Democrats in government. Can you really imagine that an unrestrained Tory government would have introduced it? It's not achieved what they wanted, and that's because of funding cuts. And yet again, the party opposite cannot bring themselves to avoid having another go at the coalition government. So it'll be very interesting to see when we have a new government just how soon economic reality becomes the excuse for why they can't actually do what we all want them to do. Yeah, I do hope they tackle social care properly. I hope we have a final and positive solution to this problem that should have been resolved years ago. We have to get it right. We have to pay and encourage our care staff better. We have to make sure there's a career progression for them. There's so much that needs to be done. Let's just hope that the next government actually does it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We'll now move to the vote, and we are voting, first of all, on the amendment. So the amendment as put to council, so we can putting out the vote. And again, if people don't have go vote, if you can raise your hand and shout loudly what your vote is. Let's sort the, have we got the go vote? Yes. Councillor Stone, you're voting against, okay? Anyone else on this side of the chamber? No. Councillor Cairns, you're voting in favour of the amendment. Councillor Wood, you're voting in favour, yeah, you're voting for the amendment. And did I see another hand? Councillor Ali here, you're voting for the amendment. Is that all the votes? So this is the vote on the amendment is 30 votes in favour, 17 against, 3 abstentions. So the amendment is carried. So we now move to the motion itself as amended. Do we need to vote on the motion as amended, Council? Agreed? Agreed? Is that agreed? Yes, have I got general agreement across the Council chamber? Okay. That concludes the business for this evening. Just a reminder that the next Council meeting is on the 10th of July. And can I also just finally remind members to remain in your places until I and the Sheriff have left the Council chamber. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance.